I do trust my intuition a lot more, and I go with the flow. That doesn't mean I don't work hard. I work really hard, but I don't plan everything, and I let my intuition guide me as to where I need to be next. Once you understand that everything, that life is an adventure and it doesn't have to be planned and it doesn't have to be controlled. You just have to let it unfold and happen for you. As soon as people feel fear, they feel powerless. And I don't want people to feel powerless, because there's 8 billion of us. Like, we can take the power back. And that's the beautiful thing about Bitcoin, is that it's a people's movement. It's a peaceful revolution. It's empowerment. It's a global money that's neutral. A global neutral money. If people are paying attention and they understand what's happening and they can see where things are going, then we have the tools at our disposal. We've just got to wake up. A warehouse that has solar, and it uses the solar at certain times of the day, and then it doesn't use the solar in its other parts and the day and weekends. So that's just stranded energy that isn't being used. So we went down, plugged in an S19, showed them how they could use this energy that would otherwise be lost and turn it into money. And that now has created an efficiency within that business that can be replicated across the UK. You have to keep your personality. I'm naturally really bubbly and I get excited by everything. And then when I'm in an environment like that, I have to work really hard, like to keep a lid on it. Why can't you just turn up and be bubbly and exciting and still have a good brain on your head and still be taken seriously?
I'm so excited to see you being bubbly and excited and with some enthusiasm, because we need that. Hey, and welcome back to New World in the Making. Today I'm talking with Susie Violet Ward. She's a journalist writing for Forbes and the CEO and co-founder of Bitcoin Policy UK. We talked about a lot of things: regulations, risks, possibilities, and the narratives shaping this new world. But also about the role of intuition, how we show up as women in these spaces, and what it means to trust our voice in the middle of so much change. So, let's dive in. Susie, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
It's really great to have finally a female representation here too. It's really a pleasure to talk with you today. Maybe can we start with a little bit of your personal background story? What did you do before, and how did you come to the place you're in right now?
God, yeah, well, that's a journey. So I started off, I dropped out of school when I was kind of 15, like nearly 16. So I didn't really leave. The school system completely let me down. It didn't suit me at all. I was I think I was too much of a rebel. They couldn't handle it. And so I just decided that this wasn't for me. And my parents were obviously concerned, and I did say to them, leave me alone. I promise I will find my own way. So like all good Bitcoiners, I went and worked in McDonald's, and the rest is kind of history, I guess, because after that, I worked out what it was that I liked doing, and I loved finance. So I decided to go to evening classes to study accountancy. And so that was the beginning of my journey. And I think the reason why school didn't suit me is because I was told what to do. And none of the things that they told me to do interested me in any way. So as soon as I could make choices on my own, which is why I think leaving at the age of 16, or like I hadn't even turned 16 by that point, really suited me, is because once I decided I was going to choose, then I just put everything in and just hyper focused. So I was an accountant, and then I started bridging between finance and IT, and became a systems analyst and a systems accountant. And then I was a developer for a system called Cognos. So everything that I did led me to Bitcoin. So when I started learning about Bitcoin, everything was already there and it was already in place and it made sense to me. But the funny thing is I still did the hundreds, if not thousands of hours of Bitcoin study on top of the 20-year career that I'd had in finance and IT. And even now, I don't feel like I understand. I only understand a pinprick.
No, I totally feel you. And so interesting to hear your story also with school and how you must be the one deciding what interests you, right? And how your parents were fine with it? Like,
No,
no.
no, but I assured them because the thing is, I think they just knew me, and I just assured them. I said, look, I promise I will make it work, but you have to leave me alone.
And how did you know then?
I
Because
just did.
that is fascinating. Because I feel like that's this feeling of, oh my God, I know that this is where I need to go, but at the same time, just all these rational ideas, right, from society of like, no, this is a path and you need to follow this. Just to trust your inner voice and say like, okay, I promise I'm gonna do this. Wow, very brave.
It went against everything. I mean, all my friends went and on and did A levels and they all went to uni. And when I came, when they all came out of uni at the age of 21, I'd been working for 5 years, had my accountancy qualification, and had bought my first home.
Wow.
And then they came out with a mountain of debt, or quite
Right,
often worthless degrees, and
right.
no work experience, because it was at that time that everybody was going to uni. So, like we understand with Bitcoin, there was no scarcity in these qualifications. I mean, if you have to do something vocational, of course, if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or an osteopath, of course you have to go to university. But a lot of these guys were doing degrees that really they didn't need for what they went on to go and do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can relate. I also did online university and yeah, I was working while I was studying. So yeah. No, and I think there's something to it, no? That you really have the work experience while you're also studying and like it's a kind of a different just a different way of seeing things.
Yeah, it formed everything for me. It was really important because the way that I learn is practically. I can't be talked at and then absorb information. So I can't
Mhm.
sit in a classroom just and then pick things up. I have to actually do it,
Yeah.
which is why it worked so well working and studying at the same time, because I was a secretary in an accounts department. So
Yeah.
I was picking things up. So it was starting from the bottom, which was great. And I think that starting from the bottom is another thing that really helped me in my career, because I learnt all the little jobs, the smaller, more menial jobs that people often scoff at. But
Yeah.
I just became really good at everything from the bottom level right through my career. Just really good at filing, really good at being able to juggle things, or uh, I don't know, all admin. Like I was brilliant at admin, and so I think learning all of those jobs and starting from the bottom, I think, gave me such a solid foundation. In addition to learning while I was working.
Yeah, and it makes us humble too, right? It's kind of like this humbling aspect to it to also appreciate those tasks and jobs.
Yeah, and I really do. I really do. And I because I know how much hard work goes
Yeah.
into a lot of those jobs, I'm so appreciative of people that do them.
That's so true. That's so true. And how did then the transition to like okay, so you were working um your way up to a more accountant and leader position, I guess? How did then what happened next?
So it just became, so a secretary, then an accounts assistant, then a management accountant, and then I became a consolidation accountant, and then I became a systems accountant, and then it just,
Hey, go
yeah,
up and up. Okay.
yeah. But I was on that ladder climbing, because that's what you do. You always want the next promotion. You want more money, and so that was almost part of a trap in a way. I mean, I know that it's essential largely, and I know that it led me to where I am, but now I don't operate like that. I'm not always looking for the next thing. I'm not always reaching for something. I do trust my intuition a lot more, and I go with the flow. That doesn't mean I don't work hard. I work really hard, but I don't plan everything, and I let my intuition guide me as to where I need to be next.
That's beautiful because I think we are a lot of times so much driven by fear, and intuition just doesn't have really space there. That is so it's very very beautiful to have that awareness about our intuition.
Yeah, because fear and control are debilitating. And I think that once you understand that, if you don't get something that you don't want, it will lead to something better. Once you understand that everything, that life is an adventure and it doesn't have to be planned and it doesn't have to be controlled. You just have to let it unfold and and happen for you. Once you change that mindset, it opens up so much more. And I think leaving fear and control behind, it was really helpful for me.
Yeah, again, very brave there. Because yeah, we love to control, right? And I guess also, well, with Bitcoin, this is also one of the things I wanted to ask you because it really changes the paradigm that we are used to as in terms of like having an entity or whatever it is, banks, governments, whatever, controlling something and one way or another kind of taking care of us. Whereas with
Yeah.
whereas with like Bitcoin, it's just another mindset, isn't
It's a
it?
shift in accountability. That's what Bitcoin is. Yes. We expect the government to tell us what to do and how to do it.
Mhm.
And we've lost that accountability, but I don't think that's entirely everybody's fault. I think that's because money is broken. So we have to go cap in hand to the government quite often and ask for their help, because the difference between the cost of living and wages has grown because money isn't connected to energy anymore. And because money isn't connected to energy, it's warped money and it's warped society. And as a result, it has allowed us to sleepwalk almost into that authoritarianism where we can have our government making problems, creating problems, then creating a solution to the problems that they created, and then that creating more problems, and then putting more on top that then fixes the problems that they've created. And it's just a really ugly cycle where everybody's just bamboozled into submission.
And okay, so I mean, let's go back a little bit just into how you transitioned from the accounting to your new um, role as a CEO and journalist and all that, because I really want to get into the whole like what you're doing now and exactly how you're maybe advocating in the government and just learning all about that. So maybe how did you transition into that?
So once I started learning about Bitcoin, my job largely became meaningless to me. I couldn't function anymore in that environment because I saw it as just a dead end, like literally a job. There was no purpose there. And so I knew that I had to leave to create something else, but I didn't know what that something else was going to be. I just knew that I wanted to do something that felt like it had some sort of purpose. So I'd been there for a long time. And I begged my boss for redundancy because I knew that I'd need some sort of runway to be able to start a brand new career. And eventually he gave it to me, luckily. And
Yes.
then I just left, and I didn't know where I was going to go or what I was going to do. But I did just trust the process. And so I kept on learning about Bitcoin. I kept following the things that interested me. And then I would get these kind of feelings where I just had to write things down. And at the time, I remember thinking, God, I've never really been a huge writer before. I mean, I did write, but just not in any large or meaningful way. Um, and so I just started writing down. And the first article that I wrote for a Substack was about central bank digital currencies, because I could see how dangerous they were and how nobody was talking about them. And then another article that I wrote was about how Bitcoin could help save the environment. But I felt compelled to do it at the time. I didn't even know if anybody was going to read it. And then I was quite lucky because I was on Twitter and I saw that the editor of Crypto AM was talking about CBDCs, or central bank digital currencies. And I, I think he said something that was pro, and I said, no, that's not right. But at the time, I was a NIM on X, or Twitter as it was then.
Yeah.
And he said, well, could you do better? And I was like,
Sure.
yeah, I think I can. Yeah. And so he said, yeah, but you're going to have to give us your real name if you want this to be published. I mean, he read the piece and he was like, it's good. I can publish it, but you have to give us your real name. So I was like, okay, so I've got a choice of having an article published that's going to go to the City of London about central bank digital currencies. And what I've got to do is give up my name. So I thought, okay, all right, I'll do it. So once that went out, I was like, wow. Like I couldn't believe they'd published it. And I couldn't believe that I'd written something that was interesting enough for it to be published. And it was such an important topic. It ticked every box. So then I thought I'd be a bit cheeky and I'd say, hey, I've written this one about Bitcoin mining. Like, I was completely expecting a no. And he was like, send it over. And then, yeah, he published that one. And that was just incredible. The amount of traction that article got was phenomenal. And for something that explained Bitcoin in a mainstream paper to the City of London, early 23, it was just so exciting. And then that then led to me being offered a regular column called My Two Sats. And I loved it because I could write about how broken the world was and how Bitcoin could fix it. And it was absolutely fantastic. And then that led to Forbes, which is more analytical. So in City AM, I was writing opinion pieces where they only really wanted my opinion. And then in Forbes, I was writing factually researched, backed up articles. So two completely different styles, but both equally brilliant. But it was the article, How Bitcoin Could Help Save the Environment, that actually led to my co-founder, Freddie New, reaching out to me saying, we want to start up this policy group. There's nothing in the UK at the moment. You've written this article. You obviously understand Bitcoin. You obviously understand mining. And we want someone to head up our mining team. Would you be interested? And I thought, well, yeah, of course, because I didn't, like I said at the beginning, I didn't know the direction that I was going to take, but I just knew that I had to take opportunities that presented themselves to me. And so of course it was a yes. And that was the beginning. We co-founded Bitcoin Policy UK, and 2.5 years later, we're we're making waves. So yeah, it's all good.
Wow, so many questions. Okay, let me start first with your first article then about CBDCs. Can you maybe explain a bit about them, why they could be dangerous? What is maybe the narrative that we're used to or will be used to now that it's going to be more and more spoken about, I guess? I think it was in this year, October, November or something, that they're planning on launching the digital currencies here in Europe. I don't know. Yeah, maybe can you give us a little bit of a global
Why
understanding?
they're dangerous. Okay, so it's programmable money.
Right.
We haven't had programmable money. They will be able to program our money so they can tell you potentially what to spend it on, where to spend it. It could expire. That we don't have that with cash now. They could end up taking money out of your bank account if they want to directly take out tax. It's a honeypot for hackers. It's just a centralized point of failure. And the narrative around it, well, there is none. No one's discussing it. If it was being discussed, I mean, it's like Brexit. It doesn't matter what side of the debate you fell on. At least it was talked about. At least it was a national debate. When you're changing the way that money works and no one's talking about it. So after the Bank of England consultation that nobody knew existed, it was only organisations like us and Big Brother Watch that were raising awareness about the fact that this was happening and that people had to have a say. But even then, if you look at the actual consultation itself and you run it through something called the Hemingway app, the average reading age in the UK is around about 9 or 10. I know it sounds sad, but it kind of is. And so, this was a paper designed at A-level entry readers. So it excluded the majority of the people anyway. Even if they knew about it, they probably wouldn't have understood it or been able to respond to it. So even that, in my opinion, was a bit of a national scandal. But 3 days after the consultation closed, only then did I see the Digital Pound Foundation go on the BBC to discuss it. And I just don't understand how you can have something as fundamental as changing the way that our money works, and it's not even in the psyche of normal people within the UK or globally, because this is a global initiative. It's not just a UK thing. CBDCs are being rolled out all over the world.
Yeah. And what kind of reactions did you get from when you wrote the article?
Really good, because the people that are paying attention were like, oh, thank goodness somebody's actually writing about it, and thank goodness this is actually out there, because prior to that there was so little information on this complete rewrite of our money.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard a few statements about how it's not going to be really anything different to what we are used to right now, but it's more like a way to make everything easier. So I think this is maybe the way that we're gonna hear more about it.
Oh yeah, of course. Convenience. That's how they sell everything to us,
Right.
is through convenience. And what I think's terrifying about it is the people that are working on this. I don't think they really understand what they're like, the harm that they're causing. Like, the people working on these projects almost certainly probably think that they're doing the right thing, because they're within that centralized noise that kind of dictates how they think and feel about things, and they're not looking outside I mean, if you have always worked for the Bank of England and you've always been within that bubble, the chances of you thinking that a CBDC is a bad thing are very slim.
Right. Of course. You kind of trust the system, right? Like, you kind of trust the whole institution as well.
I know, it's crazy how many people still actually trust the system. That blows my mind as well. But
I mean, and then what do you think? Why do we trust, and why? What are the paradigms that we would require to kind of shift?
yeah, people can feel that there's something wrong. They just don't know why.
Yeah.
I think it's mainstream media.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I know from my own experience, I write about Bitcoin. I know that there's a lot of good that Bitcoin can do. A lot of good. In fact, all my articles are on the goods of Bitcoin, right from, mining, art, through to God, all sorts of things that, but number go up is the least exciting part about Bitcoin, but there's a whole spectrum of topics: human rights, freedom money, how people can save themselves from authoritarian regimes, how it separates money and state, how it's borderless, cheap, um, can't be controlled by governments. When you think about all the amazing things that there are about Bitcoin, I've written about all of them. I did have to have a really long career to get there, though, like an accountant and then finance and then a developer. And then I had to study. A lot of these journalists, they just come out of uni with a journalism degree. And so they don't really have the tech or the finance background in addition to the study that they have to do. So once again, I think that they probably think that they're doing the right thing as well. But if you look at mainstream media, the narratives within the mainstream media when it comes to Bitcoin, and you analyze it in terms of negative, neutral, and balanced, most of it is negative. There is a very small amount of balance and there's hardly any positive. Well, we know that there's a lot of good when it comes to Bitcoin. So how the mainstream media are not covering this. Plus, they don't understand economics, because everybody who goes to university, like, they learn that there are different theories, but the main theory that they learn is Keynesian. And that doesn't necessarily lead to good outcomes, yet it's the one thing that people go back out and then kind of just reinforcing the same system that's broken. And once going back to when we tethered the connection between money and energy, when we got taken off the gold standard in 1971, that's when things started breaking. Because if you can produce a money without cost, that just makes it worth less, essentially, because you're flooding the system with a lot of debt, a lot of money. There's no value being created. And it just leads to problems. So people can feel that there's something wrong, but because they don't know all the ins and outs and they still think that their government has their best interests at heart, they haven't quite joined the dots. Plus the mainstream media narrative, obviously not writing honest journalism, which provably not honest. So recently, well, not recently, I think it was the end of 2023, I saw a Bitcoin article called "Every Bitcoin Payment Uses a Swimming Pool's Worth of Water." And everything in that article was incorrect. And it had been written by a Dutch central banker who had been discredited in 2018. And they hadn't fact checked it. And I spent 13 months trying to get a retraction, and even sent them a 16-page rebuttal from the Digital Assets Research Institute to prove that everything that they'd written at the time was wrong. You can't break through these people. So the thing is, if I write something that's incorrect in an article and someone approaches me, I'll absolutely make a correction to it because I want what I write to be correct. But if somebody's coming to you proving that everything that you've written is incorrect, that the source of your document has been discredited, and there's a conflict of interest that hasn't been disclosed, how can you ignore that? Yet somehow they did. And after 13 months, and that's one article with one news outlet.
Wow. Wow. Shocking.
This is happening all the time across the board. And so people think that they're doing their research, and they probably are doing their research.
Yeah.
But it's misinformation. And when they talk about misinformation, whether it be on the news or the government, and they talk about misinformation being rife, it absolutely is. But it's not coming from where they think it is. It's coming from our trusted news outlets.
Right. And going into that, using water or not, and using electricity and energy, and how it actually can help to allow a green transition. Can you go into that and unpack that a little bit?
So what makes Bitcoin special is its proof of work. So a lot of the other chains are proof of stake, which means that the more you have, the more chance you have of validating, the more chance you've got of winning rewards. The more you have, the more you get. Whereas proof of work, everybody is participating in the system, and it is connecting the network back to energy, which a lot of people think is a bad thing, but it isn't. When you make gold, you maybe take 80 tons of rock to make 1 ounce of gold, and the amount of energy that's required to make that gold is then there stored in that gold. You know, it's energy and time stored in something tangible. And that's kind of what Bitcoin and its proof of work mechanism has brought back to money. So once you realize that you can mine Bitcoin from stranded or wasted energy, in actual fact, it's the only way that mining Bitcoin can be profitable in most cases, because I'm not going to plug a miner into my wall. It wouldn't make me any money. So you have to go looking for the cheap stranded energy to make it a viable business. So Bitcoin miners are really good at finding that. And so once you realize that you can turn something like a toxic gas like methane into electricity, capture it, stop it from going into the environment, and then mine Bitcoin from it, wherever that methane source might be, then you start opening up a whole host of possibilities. And then you realize that when they have methane now and they flare it, they're just flaring it because they want to turn something that's a really harmful gas into a slightly less harmful gas, but they're still releasing it into the atmosphere. But by capturing it, turning it into electricity, and then creating another revenue stream, it's a beautiful solution. Something that was once a problem now turned into something that's got value.
That's so fascinating. That is really cool because it's really circular economy in a completely different way, understood very differently. And um, how do you think? Because I feel that in Western countries, we are already implementing renewables, but it's, I think, at a point where it's not really profitable so much for renewable energy companies to now invest into that. And so we kind of are at a point where it's not really moving so fast into a infrastructure that is based on renewables. And wouldn't mining really help to accelerate that infrastructure?
So that is a great observation. I mean, personally, I don't think the answer's in renewables. I think it's in nuclear. However, if we're going to use the system that we've currently got, and we currently have a lot of wind farms in the UK, for example, and across the globe. So, I mean, if you fly in an aeroplane, you go over the sea, you can see them absolutely everywhere. So when they build out wind farms, or they build out electricity for the grid, they have to build it out for max capacity. So they have to build it so that when the most that the electricity is being used, that capacity exists, which means that sometimes if the wind is blowing really hard and electricity isn't really being used, then you would stand a chance of overloading the grid. So they switch off a lot of the turbines. I don't know if you've gone past turbines that haven't been spinning and wondered why.
Yeah, no, true. Yes, in Germany we have a lot as well. Yeah, and the
Yeah.
times I not working. Yeah, true.
Yeah, exactly. And you're just like, well, why aren't you
Why?
producing electricity? You broken, or like,
Yes, yes, I would think so.
yeah, no, but
Yeah,
it's
no.
because the grid could get overwhelmed with how much electricity is being produced. So what they do is they pay wind farms to curtail, which means that they pay them to switch off. So in the UK, we pay £1 billion a year to curtail, to stop producing energy.
Wow.
And that goes onto the cost of our electricity bills that are the highest in Europe. So, as we build out renewables and more wind farms occur, that cost of curtailment's only going to increase. But if you had something that allowed you to not have to switch off, i.e., curtail, and you could redirect that energy in an instant over to something that could actually generate you value, then you've got the perfect solution. And the brilliant thing is it's not hypothetical. They're doing this. I mean, the best example of this is Texas.
Mhm.
They have a lot of Bitcoin mining in Texas, and it's because they have like an ERCOT flexible grid structure. So it's an independent power grid that's kind of separate from the rest of the US. And it just shows as a great little microcosm of what's possible when you have flexibility. And because they have an abundance of cheap energy like wind and solar and natural gas, and a lot of it could go unused. Sometimes they even pay miners to take the electricity because they provide such a useful service.
That's so cool. What about the heat and the humming noise? I have a friend that's from Texas, and she was asking me that the other day, and I couldn't answer. So
Well, she said, can she hear it? Is it too noisy?
it there are some complaints about that. Yeah.
So, I mean, there are ways that you can reduce the noise, and they do have now they put some of them in liquid solutions.
Oh,
So there's different ways that you can do it, and they wouldn't even require fans. So I think that would be up to individual miners, but it is something that's being resolved. I mean, the noise. I mean, we've got a little bit axe, and even sometimes the noise of that little bit axe, like I'm just like, I don't know. So I do understand, but there are solutions, and I don't know, noise pollution versus balancing the grid. I mean, sometimes there's got to be a little bit of a trade off. I don't know.
yeah. And what do you think then is keeping us from going into that direction? Like, why are we not seeing more of this, especially in Western countries,
So
using so much energy?
yeah, and productivity and prosperity goes up with the amount of energy that a country uses. There's a direct link. So when you look at a government's initiative to reduce electricity usage, it's so counterintuitive to any country that wants to grow and be prosperous. The answer is not reducing electricity. The answer is finding out how to have an abundance of electricity. Because I do think at some point when they've cracked this, and we've got energy everywhere, all over the planet. I think that once they actually work this out, I think energy at some point in the future will be free. Um, like it just like for example, like nuclear, we haven't been investing on that in that. It like just like Bitcoin, it got demonized so heavily that people have never really recovered from those narratives. So you know, I
What
just
about nuclear? Like, what? Because I also read a lot about nuclear being very expensive just to set up the whole infrastructure, and like just in building the and maybe some micro nuclear plants are less expensive, but also probably still too expensive.
Yeah, no, they take a long time to set up and they are very expensive. Yeah.
But still, you think they would still make it more profitable and would make more sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's clean. It's completely clean. It's the one of the cleanest energies that we've got, and it's very efficient and it's energy dense. And in a world where we're going to need to keep growing our electricity supply because of everything that we're doing. I mean, AI is just sucking it all up. I mean, when you think about how where it's going, you're going to need really clean, energy dense solutions. And I just don't see wind. Also, I mean, I don't know why we've got solar panels all over the UK. I mean, that's got to be because of. So I know it's silly, isn't it? It's so silly, and it's got to be government subsidies distorting the market, creating. They wouldn't survive without government subsidies. They wouldn't even be there, and that's an example of how when governments interfere with things and they don't let the free market decide, they actually create more problems, and they do it all the time. All the time. And then they'll just put in more rules and more legislation to try and paper over the problems that they created in the first place and just create more problems on top of problems.
And do you think the free market could handle everything? Like healthcare, education, all these things. Um, but then also a question, that Jeff Booth always asks also, have we ever been in a free market? Do we actually know what it's like?
I mean, that's a really good point, because while you've got governments are almost like the parasites that stop free markets from existing. So even when you think that you've got a free market, you don't. So yeah, have we ever seen a true free market? Probably not.
Yeah. It's a very interesting debate to have because yeah, I have myself like just conflicting ideas there because it's like yeah, we don't want to leave anyone behind and still make it equitable for everyone and if it's like a free market thing, what happens in a crisis? I don't know,
Mm.
you know.
Well, community needs to step up, don't they? And they've disseminated community, really. So you could argue that broken money has done that to a large extent. I mean, my family came. They were second generation immigrants. My nonna came from Italy. My nonna came from Poland. So the little village that my nonna came from, everybody knew each other. You know, it really did take a village to bring up a kid. But it was so much more chilled out. You had someone who was doing the cooking while someone else was looking after the kids, or could take them out to the shops, or could do this. The pressure just wasn't there, and everybody helped each other. So, you know, what would happen in crisis now when we don't have that sense of community or closeness? It's a very different thing. However, if we did have strong communities, um, then I'd like to think that it would be a complete different story, and there'd be a lot of help for people there.
Yeah, very good point. I think yeah, we've lost a lot of community sense for sure. um you were already mentioning AI. How do you see AI evolving in all this?
It's going to factor in everything, isn't it? I mean, it really is, and that's another reason why I think Bitcoin is inevitable, because it's the money of the internet. It's going to be the only thing that AI is going to really be able to use, that's inherent to the internet, that's going to, take payments, control spam. Lots of micropayments are going to come into their own. And I don't really see anything else that can serve that purpose.
Okay, can you go a little bit more into that and explain this a bit more? I think this is
Uh,
pretty tough.
so, so when you think about the smallest amount of Bitcoin, like a Satoshi, it's like a fraction of a penny. It, just as an example, if you were a bot and you were going to spam someone, at the moment it's kind of essentially free to spam. You can just like send out loads of stuff. But if all of a sudden there was a very small cost attached to it, tiny cost, you couldn't do it to the same degree as you did. And I think it would just, cut down on a lot of the internet noise if all of a sudden, you had fractions fractions of a penny used to validate.
What about the economics? If we suddenly have AI and you were already mentioning as well, energy might be free at some point, and maybe everything is becoming more and more abundant. How do we still have an economy? Um, because everything that we've known so far is an economy based on scarcity. So, how do we do this? And how could Bitcoin maybe help in that?
The future is very uncertain. It's very difficult to know how this is going to play out.
Very true.
Because I do think that we're at a crossroads where we could go down the freedom route or the authoritarian route, and if technology could free us or enslave us. So it's very difficult to know which way the wind will eventually blow. I hope it's the freedom route, obviously. I have a horrible feeling that we're heading towards authoritarianism. As people do ultimately end up losing their jobs, they could either end up with more time to
Hmm.
do the things that they enjoy doing on a universal basic income, perhaps paid for by the AI companies that are generating all the money, is one possibility. Um, or it just means complete entrapment, where you have to go cap in hand to the government asking for money and they can control everything that you do. I don't know. I don't know which direction it's going to go in. I'm a little bit worried about that.
Yeah. And I mean, how do you see the talking, or what is your experience right now with the work that you're doing at UK policy? Um, how do you see this? What are the conversations you're having? What are you advocating for?
So trying to the biggest issue that we've got at the moment is not anything to do with AI. It's to do with our Financial Conduct Authority, our FCA, not understanding the difference between Bitcoin and crypto.
Okay.
So Bitcoin has 65% dominance in the whole crypto space, and everything's bleeding into Bitcoin. It's a decentralized protocol. It's a commodity. It's completely different to crypto, which are VC companies, of which there are millions of them. So to put them both into the same risk category, which is what our Financial Conduct Authority have done, just shows a lack of understanding, but it's also harming investors and driving out growth. So, first and foremost, the thing that we need to do is help educate them and try and get them to understand that Bitcoin and crypto have very different risk profiles and should be split.
And how far are you coming? What are the resistance?
So I'm always trying to work out why is it so hard to,
Mm-hmm.
to educate these people? What's the problem? And so I've spoken to a few people, and the the most logical thing that has come out of my discussions so far is that the FCA were investigating Bitcoin in 2011. And every time somebody gets asked to look into Bitcoin and they figure out exactly what it does, they leave.
What?
Because you would, wouldn't you? They either go and set up their own business, or they think, hang on a second, I've just suddenly seen how broken this nonsense is. Why am I sitting here in the FCA? I've got better things to be doing. And so they kind of don't, the turnover at the FCA is so high, and so therefore it's just very, very difficult to break through
Yeah.
that barrier.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And would you say, okay, so it's education for one, and then regulation, taxing, all these things. Do you see something happening in some way so that also we could maybe at some point see Bitcoin as a currency as well in some way or another? Do you see this thing?
Yeah, I mean, I've wondered if this will happen in my lifetime. I do often wonder if all the things that I'm doing now, if I will ever see what I want to happen, or if it's just a case of, like planting a tree for someone else to see it become a big oak tree. Like I may never see it. I don't know how long it's going to take. I do know that our currencies are broken. They're all going to break at different stages. Everything. I think the US dollar will probably be the last one to pop, but you see these currencies kind of popping all over the place. You've got Zimbabwe, Lebanon, Argentina. They're all. It's just a matter of time. Timing it, I just don't know. But I do think all of these fiat currencies will eventually um, disappear, and that Bitcoin will be the life raft that people need to exit that fiat system. Timescales, I really, really not sure. It could happen very quickly, or they could just keep grinding along and string it out. It's tricky. Not sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I also sometimes feel it's very hard for businesses, for instance, to even think about Bitcoin because
Yeah.
obviously, like, there's a lot of regulation, taxing, making it super hard. I mean, are you doing something in that regard too with um the policy work?
With regards to taxation,
Mm.
so the Reform have actually come out with some of the best crypto policies that we've seen across any of the parties, and they want to reduce capital gains tax to 10% on crypto. I mean, I'd like to see it at 0% on Bitcoin, but it's a start. Tax is definitely a huge issue. I mean, another problem that we've got is we can't buy Bitcoin spot ETFs in this country. So the same beginning of 2024, the same week that America approved their first Bitcoin spot ETF, we brought in legislation that made it harder for companies or for retail investors, to buy Bitcoin. We had made it more difficult for the on-off ramps, cooling off periods, all sorts of nonsense that just made it much, much harder for people to actually buy it. And then it went on. When that 2024, there were 100% gains. The FCA were preventing retail. Their mandate is to prevent harm, and they were stopping retail from investing in the best performing asset of the decade just before it was about to go up by 100%. And it was in the same week that they implemented that the US approved a Bitcoin spot ETF. It just doesn't make any sense at all. And so what that forced people to do was that they had to, if they wanted a tax-free environment, say in their ISAs, they had to then buy proxies, which were way more risky. So everybody in the UK was then forced to buy MicroStrategy to get some Bitcoin exposure, when really all they wanted to do was buy Bitcoin, but they were being prevented from doing it in multiple ways.
Do you know why? Like why that happened? I mean, why is the US so pro? And then here it's a little bit different.
I really don't know, because when Emma Reynolds was asked at the Financial Times Digital Asset Summit why, if the US were going to have a strategic Bitcoin reserve, why the UK were not looking into it, she just shrugged and said, well, it's not for us. And they're still using the same narratives that they did, the volatility and, risky, all that kind of malarkey. They're not researching it, looking into it, seeing how it's changed. And quite frankly, they're probably victim to reading some of these BBC articles that are really poorly researched and are forming their opinion based on that. It's a mess.
Yeah. So what is your main focus right now? Where are you putting your main energy into?
So changing the FCAs, so getting them to understand the difference between Bitcoin and crypto, trying to get retail investors so they can enter the market. We had a little win where they allowed ETNs, but they're like a debt instrument. They're not the same, but it was like the beginning. So I think next step could be retail ETFs. That would be huge if we allowed or helped retail gain access, and understanding the difference between Bitcoin and crypto. That would be absolutely massive. We just want to advocate for anybody who wants to buy, hold, and mine Bitcoin. It's not a big ask.
Right. And I mean, a few would argue that it is maybe risky for Bitcoin to go into the ETF space, to be also inside of the more normal financial system, let's say. Do you see any risk there?
Everything's got risk. I mean, everything can go to zero, even your house. Like what happens if, like, all of a sudden war breaks out and you suddenly have to leave? Your house is going to be worthless and you can't take it with you. So to think that there are things that are completely risk free is just not true. But Bitcoin, it has become a lot less volatile. It's probably less volatile now than an average tech stock. As I said earlier, it's the best performing asset of the decade. And a lot of institutions are now getting on board and advising it as part of their pension schemes and people's portfolios. The 60/40 stock bond portfolio is dead. Bonds are not performing. I would say that traditionally they've been the safe bet, now very, very risky. So people have just got to catch up. They've got to catch up, and they've got to start understanding that this is a new asset class, that it's not going away. It is the best performing asset of the decade, And in actual fact, if they want to bridge the fact that their portfolios are underperforming, it's probably going to be the only way that they can do it.
And what are new projects that you would be excited about? What is on your radar?
So I can't. I've got a lot of NDAs that I can't talk about a lot of
I
things.
get that.
But we are working on a lot of proof of concepts in the UK, because telling the government and businesses that Bitcoin mining is brilliant and that it can solve lots of problems is useless, essentially. So we have to show them. We have to show them how it can. So we've got a great little project where we took some S19 miners down to a warehouse that has solar, and it uses the solar at certain times of the day, and then it doesn't use the solar in its other parts in the day and weekends. So that's just stranded energy that isn't being used. So we went down, plugged in an S19, showed them how they could use this energy that would otherwise be lost and turn it into money. And that now has created an efficiency within that business that can be replicated across the UK. Once we can get more proof of concepts where we can show people what it can do, and then you've got the excess heat that comes off these miners. In Holland, they grow tulips and peppers with Bitcoin mining heat.
So cool.
It's amazing. In Iceland, they were talking about how they had to choose, because they've got an abundance of renewables like geothermal, and they were trying to say, like, should we be using this geothermal to mine Bitcoin when we've got food insecurity? The two didn't really go together in that sense, but when you see that over nine, it was like £9 million of soft fruit gets imported in, they could grow that themselves using Bitcoin mining, using the geothermal and the waste heat. You've saved all of the carbon emissions of flying it in. You've produced it in the country. You're using a renewable resource. You're using the waste heat that comes off it, and you're producing food. I mean, once the penny drops, and like I said, these are not hypotheticals. There are people doing this. Like, it's actually happening, but it makes business sense. We've just got to try and find ways of showing people.
I love that you're saying that, yeah, it's about showing, because yeah, this was one of my main just concerns of like, why are we not doing more of all this? Like,
Mm.
what is stopping us? And I guess it's just because we are technically just based on the old infrastructure, and it's very hard for us to really change things. Um, but yeah, I mean, I would love to see more of those projects, and know what are the steps to follow for a more decentralized, more local energy grid. Because also, I mean, also I get it. I mean, all the big energy companies would be losing a lot of their money when we do
Yeah,
that.
and they're being paid regardless. So, like, I think that Bitcoin mining has so much potential. But if I owned a wind farm and the government were paying me to switch off, why would I then implement a solution that hasn't really been tested in the UK that just sounds like a good idea? I wouldn't. I'd just take the money from the government and just be like,
Right,
well, that's easy.
right.
So, you know,
Yeah. And also, I mean, we would rely less on all these fossil fuel companies. So, not sure how happy they are.
well, I think they've had to fire up some more coal stations recently. Didn't they shut down some nuclear power stations and then ended up realizing that they had to?
Have other energy income sources.
Didn't they do that in Germany? Was it Germany that they did that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Germany did a few of those things, and yeah, is now heavily relying on um other energy sources like coal and gas and all that. And now there's war, and we're relying on Russia. So yeah, well, this is
There's a lot that doesn't make sense. So when you're operating in a world that makes very little sense, with very poor incentives, with a mainstream media that are muddying the waters, and then a government that aren't really interested in learning, I mean, you can see why it's not working out, can't you?
I mean, at the end of the day, we're all trying to survive in the middle of the chaos, right?
Yeah, and it is chaos.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is sometimes. I mean, and it also, I mean, it's overwhelming, right? And I think there are just very few, like you were saying about doing that work of just going into your intuition and just giving and allowing yourself to trust that. Because I think if we had more of us, all of us really going with what feels right, the intuition part, this world probably would look very different.
It would. I think it really would, but we haven't been programmed like that. And you could
True.
also go back to the school system and how it indoctrinates people and essentially knocks out their creativity and their problem solving skills. I mean, if all you're taught to do is sit still for an hour and learn by rote, and then your intelligence is judged on how well you do an exam to regurgitate information that you've learned in a classroom, that's not intelligence, is it? That's what we as a society think is the gold standard of intellect, and there are
Mm.
so many different types of intelligence that we are just shutting down because
Yeah.
our school system is another one of those broken systems that's harming us. It suits some people, don't get me wrong, some
No,
people
of course.
really do well in those environments, but there's a lot of people that do not.
Yeah. No, and what do we do with all the ones that are not really suited for that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they're probably the geniuses that are getting lost as well. I mean, like imagine if, because I often think this, like, you've got it's a well-known thing that most of these big successful entrepreneurs were not particularly good at school. That type of brain type doesn't flourish in that setting, but it does in others. So how many brilliant people are we missing because our school system is another one of those broken systems?
And why do you think that this whole why did it not suit you, and why did you have that courage to just go with it?
I don't know if it's courage. I think it's just I just do it without thinking really.
Yeah.
Um, I
But
just
yeah, why
knew.
can you? Why can you just not think about it? I guess because I guess we all would have that maybe, but then probably a lot of us would say like, "Oh, no, 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 wait a second. This is dangerous," or "This is just
Yeah,
unknown
maybe I
territory."
just don't have that risky. I don't know. Risk tolerance, I don't know, maybe it's just different, or maybe the alternative was just so much worse. I felt like it, maybe that's what it was. I
Maybe.
mean, like, the situation I was in was just so bad and detrimental to me. I got nothing from it at all, so I almost had no choice. So maybe that's why it didn't feel risky. Maybe the risk was staying.
Right. The risk was staying. That's beautiful. And do you have like your parents or family that was already also maybe doing things differently that you could see it in some way or another?
I think my dad was he was similar. I think he was very similar to me. And now looking back, I think that we had very similar brain types and personalities.
Okay.
So he had a very similar thing. He had two brothers that went to uni. One did a PhD, another one went on to become a very successful engineer, and then he was a school leaver as well at 16 with kind of no O levels, I think that they were at the time. But he was the one that went on to have the more successful career and ultimately earn the most money, I think, or at the end of the day. Although saying that, my uncle did actually go on to invent something that now gets implemented across all railways. So
Oh,
he is an inventor as well. So like he's very successful in his own right. I'm not diminishing his accomplishments at all. But that happened later on in life, and I think the point I'm trying to make is that my dad was also one of those people where the school system didn't work. But when he got into work, and so once again, he worked for British Telecom, and he started off as a telephone engineer going up poles to fix
wow.
telephones, and then ended up being a senior manager where he looked after all the communications in London. So it's another example of where you kind of learn in a practical way, and you start from the bottom and you work your way up, and it just gives you a really good foundation. So I think, yeah, I think I saw my dad. I don't know how easy it would be for kids to do it now, because I think there's a real stigma attached, and I don't think you're even allowed to leave school at 16. I think you're forced to go on and do something until you're 18.
I was about to ask you if now there was someone listening to us. I mean, I have a little sister. She is she is in a free school, but she's still very little. She's 11.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can see that she's just flourishing in that like free school environment where it's just very different, and I can really see how good it is for her. Um, and I could see how maybe a more regulated environment could really stifle her creativity and just yeah. But how easy could it be for other kids, young adults right now, especially also with all the chaos with AI? I don't know,
Mm.
what would you say? What kind of advice, or not advice, but just
I think build, like exactly like what you're doing with your podcast. You're building something. You're taking your own initiative. You're doing something for yourself, and you're building something that's yours. And that's proof of work. So just build something, figure it out. What do you want to do? It doesn't, not podcast, it could be a product, it can be an app, it could be, I don't know, it could be anything. What does the world need? How could you fix it? Like for example, you're dealing with education and misinformation. You want to go and speak to people so you can get good information out there. There's a lack of good information. You're plugging a gap.
that's very true. That's very true.
So
Yeah,
build something. That's what I would say. Prove to people, a little bit like our proof of concepts when it comes to our mining. Stop telling people what you can do and just go and show them.
yeah, I love that because it really gives us back agency. And I feel like
Yeah.
we kind of tend to not believe in our own abilities, or thinking that who am I to do something, especially now that ChatGPT can do everything better. And
It can't.
yeah, no, I guess the human aspect is a very important one as well.
It's the one thing that it can't take away. It's the one thing that I encourage the most with my kids. So I don't give them a hard time on their schoolwork, really. I think if they get a terrible grade, they're going to feel terrible about it and they'll fix it themselves. I think that's the only way that I drove myself, was feeling the failure and then never wanting to feel that again, and then correcting it. Having someone over me telling me, "No, you got to do well," like it didn't work. But my daughter is a brilliant actress, and my son loves ice hockey. And I just realized that they're the two things that AI will not be able to take away: live acting and live sport.
That's true. Live sports is also, yeah, a wonderful, yeah, and something that we are so used to as a society to watch games, right? And yeah, I mean, this is not something where AI can actually do something.
No one would want to go and watch robots running around on a football pitch.
That's very true. I love that you were saying failure. So, what did you learn about failure?
It's really important. And it isn't failure. It's just like, what do they say? First attempt in learning, FAIL.
Oh, I love that.
So I know it's so cheesy, but like at the same time, it's kind of true. And
Yeah.
don't be afraid to fail, because it's not ever failing. You always learn something. Like I'll always give something a go, always, even if I look silly or I know that I'm not going to achieve it. Some people are too scared to do that.
Yeah. I think we tend to be very scared to fail and to do all these things because also um what does it say about us, right? Because we don't see it as a first attempt of learning. It's more like, well, I failed and now that's done. That means I'm this over that.
Yeah, no. All it means is that you just have to get back up again, carry on, and then figure out what to do next.
We already covered that it's 5 years. It's very hard to predict. I know. going to happen. But since this is a podcast where we explored the new world in the making, what do you think are we heading towards, and what could our activity, or like what could our attempt look like? Where should we put our energy into?
Okay, I am concerned that we are heading into a surveillance state.
Right.
I think that the technology around us is growing too quickly and becoming very intrusive, and that people don't really understand the implications. And it could be anything from CCTV and the surveillance, people are being recorded all the time without them knowing, tied in with facial recognition, with payments. And then you've got KYC, know your customer, all the data collection that's happening that isn't required. It doesn't solve anything. They're bringing in something called the FATF travel rule, which means that they're going to be collecting a lot of information that they don't actually need to collect, that's going to travel with transactions. That's going to be another centralized data collection. That's going to be a honeypot for hackers. And it doesn't even stop illicit activities, and everything that they're doing is under the guise of it's protection, it's, stopping the criminals. But if you look at in the current financial system, 3 to 5% of global GDP is they estimated to be from illicit activities in the current financial system. So what they're doing in the current financial system, they're trying to bring it into crypto when 0.14% of transactions are to do with illicit activities. So they want to bring that data collection that they know doesn't work into an environment where there isn't so much of a problem, but it does cause actual harm and risk, because all of our data is out there, and I don't trust the people that are looking after it to keep it safe. We've had so many times when it's been hacked, like HMRC. I think, don't know the exact number, but I think that criminals managed to access 100,000 users' data from an HMRC database. We know that there's been lots of incidents where crypto millionaires have been doxxed and then kidnapped or had their fingers cut off, so it actually has real world harm. And so they're collecting all of this information that doesn't actually solve a problem, and you can prove that it doesn't solve a problem. Then you tie that into surveillance, CBDCs, data collection. Your phones are tracking you, your GPS, everything that you do, your history. It's probably even listening to us now. It's terrifying where it's heading. And I would like to really raise awareness, because people who aren't aware necessarily say that if you've got nothing to hide, then why is it a problem? And that's the mentality I think a lot of people have who believe in the legacy system, the people that actually think their government has their best interest at heart. Like that's the mindset that they have. And privacy's almost become a bit of a dirty word. And privacy is very normal. And I should have the ability to disclose what I want to disclose to the world without it being taken away from me. So where is this heading? Well, if we don't pay attention and we don't raise awareness, we're heading into digital prisons.
I see. Yeah. So
Sorry.
No.
Sorry. Did you want something cheery?
No. This is no. I really want to have all the perspectives, and I think it is important that we raise awareness. I totally agree. I mean, also, one of the main reasons of this podcast is to, in general, question things and raise awareness, right? So, what is happening and what could be happening and where we could be going. I think this is very interesting, and it's important that we talk about it. What you were saying in the beginning, right? That we talk about CBDCs, that we know what's going on, and that you can then be in favor or against it, but at least like we talk about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have something that we can agree or not agree on, but at least we know what's happening.
Yep.
So, um, so do you think we should be scared? More scared?
Well, you know, I
Mhm.
think we should be aware.
Mhm.
Um, I don't really want people to be fearful
Yeah.
because we had that, didn't we, during COVID? I mean,
Mm.
what's the expression? You can make a rich man buy anything, a poor man eat anything, and a scared man do anything. As soon as people feel fear, they feel powerless. And I don't want people to feel powerless because there's 8 billion of us.
Yeah.
Like, we can take the power back. And that's the beautiful thing about Bitcoin, is that it's a people's movement. It's a peaceful revolution. It's a way of saying, hang on a second, you don't have to control our money. We don't need a government to control us. We can make those decisions for ourselves. It's empowerment. It's a global money that's neutral. A global neutral money. Like, I get that's why I love Bitcoin, because if people are paying attention and they understand what's happening and they can see where things are going, then we have the tools at our disposal. We've just got to wake up.
Yeah. 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 It's just yeah. It's just funny how we are so scared of changing.
Yeah, I know, but then that might not be anyone's fault, except for the fact that,
Nope.
there's a lot of misinformation out there. People don't have the right information. All of these news outlets, they have a monopoly over information, and they're not providing the correct information. So when people are doing their research, it's not like they're reading something and understanding. They have to read something, look into it, and think, actually, is that true? And there's so much to consider when you're trying to, you know, piece together the puzzle.
Yeah. I also feel that a lot of the times we as women are maybe even having less access to things. Um, I mean, I would love to hear your perspective on this because you've been way longer in this space, and yeah, I mean, also even before Bitcoin and finance. How do you see that? Because I mean, I feel that from my experience, it was very much like we were more women than men in the master I did in sustainability and innovation. But then when it came to the finance master, it was mainly just, I don't know, 80% maybe were men, maybe 90 even. So I feel that there's still a kind of just a wall that is not really easy for us to enter. And I also would love, that's why also I also want this podcast to be a space where also we as women feel a little bit more safe to enter that space, to know that okay, money is not dangerous, money is not something that we need to be scared of, or because also I mean it's proven, right, that investing, women investing are making way more long-term decisions, and mm, really look out for more prosperous ways of investing. I don't know, can you share a bit your perspective on this?
So I had a life before Bitcoin. And so I've got two different perspectives.
Yes.
So when I worked in the city doing my finance and IT job, at no point did I ever feel like there was a disparity between men and women. I didn't feel like I was disadvantaged in any way. I didn't feel like I couldn't get promoted. I didn't
Yeah.
feel overlooked. Nothing. I actually naively thought that sexism was a thing of the past.
Hmm.
And then I came into the Bitcoin space and it hit me, it literally hit me like a brick. And it's very difficult to talk about because whenever you do mention these issues, obviously the space is very full of men, and you get some really good guys who really see the issue and they're very open to talking about it. And then you get another cohort that just want to shut it down and disregard what it is you have to say. But As for why it is, I think it's complex. I think technologies naturally, men gravitate towards them. Why? Possibly social conditioning, um, brain types, maybe. But I think largely social conditioning. I think plays a huge part in that. I know that men naturally like helping men. So, one of the largest Bitcoin podcasts, without mentioning names, mostly only had men on it, which then reinforced the thing that men's voices were the only ones that mattered, and there were only men in the space because that podcast didn't give a platform to women's voices, or very, very few. And I think that then just created a cycle that was very difficult to break out of, and then created a culture that was very difficult to break out of. And I know this because in America, the Bitcoin space is very male dominated. I think for that reason, I think a culture was created that was difficult to break. In the UK, I work with a lot of women at Bitcoin Policy UK, and they're all incredible. Women do exist in Bitcoin, and they're fantastic. And even with the work that I do at Roxham, with the shows that I do, actually more women are coming into the studio than men. And this is in the UK. And I think it's because we started off with a more healthy culture. It wasn't cultivated in a way that was led by a man helping men, you know. So I think that once that culture is created, it then can create something that is potentially quite toxic.
Hmm.
And we're not seeing that in the UK now, and I think that's because it hasn't had that same kind of influence. I do think that women have different, not always, like, this is a generalization. I'm very
Of
uncomfortable
course.
with generalizing because I also don't want to be put into a box, you
Of
know.
course.
But I know that uh women can often have the bear the brunt of childcare, for example. Men historically have had more freedom when it comes to that, whereas it's the women that have to juggle. That is absolutely not the case. There are some amazing daddies out there that are completely equal to their partners. Just like my husband is. If it wasn't for my husband, I wouldn't be able to do this. We balance each other out, and so I'm very mindful of saying that women bear the brunt of the childcare. But when I first had a baby in 2010, I had to take a demotion so I could work part time. And that was a large part of the reason why I needed the redundancy to be able to create a new career, because I'd worked part time. I was essentially not really worth investing in, and my career just went downhill from when I had that baby. And so therefore, when recruitment consultants would phone me up and ask me if I was interested in moving, the second I said I needed to be part time, they almost put the phone down on me. So,
Yeah.
I lost my career through having to make choices to accommodate my kids. My husband was self-employed, so he could take the decisions, and we could share it, and that was great. But I saw a lot of women that really did get
Hmm.
shafted, essentially, when they had kids, because the man goes back to work, his career stays the same, nothing changes, and the changes happen for the woman. So what the reasons are, I mean, it's so complex, isn't it? There's so many
So
different reasons, and I couldn't even pinpoint it to one. All I do say, I feel very uncomfortable talking about it, because even this conversation, I feel that people would just rip into it and
judge
dismiss
a
it.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get it, and I think it's a very delicate topic.
But
Uh,
what did you think of my reasons? Are they anything that you'd considered before? Like, do you think that
Definitely,
they're fair
definitely.
enough?
Yes, 100%. I I think that a lot of women have a hard time with work and family and how to do the balance, and how to not be, yeah, taking a step back in their careers and then still be promoted or still have a chance to be promoted. So yeah, so having your own self-employed job is I guess it's very different, and like what your husband did, that makes it, I guess, way easier to make it work in some way or another. I don't know if we could see more and more flexibility in the work environments to adapt a little bit more of what we might need in order to have families and be still working. Um, Maybe with AI now, this also can help. Um, I don't know, but for sure, I I think there are a lot of social, um, yeah, social constraints for us to. We've been educated in very different ways socially, just as a culture, and I think in general, things like, yeah, things like finances, like Bitcoin tech, like AI, all these things is just socially just not really something that we would maybe probably even allow ourselves to just be interested or just go into that, because it's what you're saying. Also, we see more the a male dominant representation, so we might feel a little bit less. We might feel less comfortable looking into that and researching and saying like, well, I could maybe add something here or there, it having that sensation of feeling that we also have a voice and we can go and do stuff. I think that's something that is, yeah, it's a message that we've been kind of told in one way or another, unaware, unconscious. It's very complex what you were saying.
Mm.
So, and at the same time, I feel also that a lot of men are also very lost right now, because like society, always told them to be the provider, be, the male figure that provides for the family, and is that main support. And now um, just jobs are switching and more women are making the money, and now I also see that, I don't know, for men it must be super hard to also understand what's going on, like what,
Mm.
I was raised into being that person, and then suddenly I can't really provide it. Like, what's my role now? What am I supposed to do? They're not like role models really that really are something to follow. And I think in general we as women are being more and more masculine at the same time. So I think there is a big mix of things right now that it's I think confusing. And the thing, what you were saying, I feel the same. It's just something that it's very weird to talk about. It's very uncomfortable to talk
Yeah.
about, because you make yourself very vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly. I know that I'm going to upset a lot of people by saying certain things and they'll be able to pick it apart. And one thing that I forgot to mention as well, which I think is unconscious in a lot of ways, I think there's a lot of unconscious sexism. I don't think in any way, shape, or form that it's malicious. I really don't.
I
But I don't know if you've noticed this. Men automatically get given respect. Women have to work really hard to earn it. And that's another fundamental difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you experienced that?
Um, yes. Especially I also tend to like, people think that I'm younger than I am. So then
Can I ask you how old you are?
yeah, I'm turning 30 in a month.
Are you? Yeah, I thought you were younger. Yeah, definitely. Well, that's brilliant, though, for God's sake.
Yeah, but I mean, I always heard that I'm gonna be very happy at some point, that people think that I'm younger. But sometimes this is also, it gives me the disadvantage of people not taking me seriously. Uh, and
Yeah.
yeah, and sometimes, I'm a little bit flowery, happy,
Me
and
too. That's exactly it. Like you have to keep your personality. I'm naturally really bubbly and I get excited by everything. And then when I'm in an environment like that, I have to work really hard, like
to
keep
be.
a lid on it. Yeah, but I
Uh-huh.
can't do that because I've got one
No.
personality and that's it. And I struggle with exactly that. Like, why can't you just turn up and be bubbly and exciting and still have a good brain on your head and still be
Exactly.
taken seriously? Why is it that you can't that your ability to work is judged by how serious and conformist you can be? Like, it doesn't make sense.
Yes, no, no. And I honestly, I'm so excited to see you being bubbly and excited and, with some enthusiasm because we need that. We need that because what you were saying earlier about fear. So we need a little bit more of that, and yeah, and just disprove as well what we are taught to think, that if you're a happy flower, bubbly, whatever, you're kind of not serious, or you're not intelligent, or I don't know what kind of narratives we all have. But yeah,
But that's unconscious too, in
totally,
in a
totally.
way,
And
isn't it? And ridiculous, because if you're a man and you put on a grey suit and you go into the city, straight away people are going to think that you mean business, but you could be totally mediocre. But you're just hiding behind a suit. But if you suddenly put on a pretty dress, some stilettos, and some bright red lipstick, and you're definitely not going to get taken as seriously as the mediocre guy in a grey suit, but you could be smashing it, like, with a brilliant head on your shoulders. But people just, the judgments that people have that are programmed and conditioned into them are, well, it's harmful, really, isn't it? Because it goes back to the school system not supporting people. How many brilliant people are we missing because of these preconceived ideas?
yeah, no, it's in the end, it's very so much narrative based, and we have so many narratives that I think the problem is unaware of. We are so
Mm,
unaware of these narratives because I think the issue is not really having them. I think we all have bias. We all have
of
a lot
course.
of these, well, different narratives. But the thing is not knowing that we have them. And when we don't know that we have them and we just act on these assumptions, well, that's not maybe so, yeah, not really the reality that we would like to see now. And
It requires some soul searching as well, though, doesn't it? Which I feel might be lacking sometimes, especially in this kind of time poor society that we're in. No one really gets the time to sit down and reflect on their unconscious biases and why they might be thinking so. I think about it all the time, but then that's because I spend a lot of time thinking, just generally, but I'm not so sure other people do.
I agree. And I also, I guess, I mean, there's also not really time to do that right now. I think we're all so much hustling right now, and there's just not really time. A lot of the times, no time to do this because, yeah, I mean, I need to be worried about paying my rent and eating tomorrow, and how am I doing with my job because I can't lose it, and just in that constant, yeah, just nonstop,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah,
It's funny, isn't it, how technology has been designed to make our lives easier. Yeah. Somehow we've got less time and everything's harder. I don't understand that.
I know. That's, yeah. I don't understand that either. And at the same time, I also feel it's maybe easier for us women to talk about these things. So even like um just it's easier to look and do that self-reflection.
Mm,
Um we have more access to that socially. Just it's more acknowledged, and also we can talk about it with other um usually female friends.
yeah.
It's not something awkward or weird to do, but I feel that a lot of men don't really have those spaces, and also that I guess we should allow these spaces to flourish and create those spaces where it's also nice for men to, like, it's easy for them to come and explore, and it's not weird that they ask these questions too. So
Yeah, no, and they do enjoy it as well. I remember sometimes I'd go out with a coffee with the mummies down the gym sometimes if they were there. And my husband Rob just popped in once and he just sat down with the mummies and he got himself a coffee and he sat there and he just crossed his legs and he went, "So Anna, how's Chris?" And it was just the way he said he just wanted to be a part of the conversation, you know,
yeah,
like he wanted to be like a mummy having a chat with a coffee. And it was just so sweet. And I could see that he didn't really get that because he's quite emotionally intelligent and likes to have these kind of conversations. And I think that he loved being a part of it. And I think a lot of men would love being a part of a slightly different dynamic, a different tangent of conversation, maybe something a bit more spiritual or emotional. Like it doesn't, they don't have to be taboo subjects, you know,
no,
like we are human beings.
exactly. I think this is what makes us human.
Yeah.
This is what makes us so different from AI. So yeah, I really think that there's a lot of potential because of AI to really bring us closer to that and open up these spaces, because it's what you're saying with your husband, and I feel that with my boyfriend too. And I think this is just a yeah, there's a development for sure, and a space for men that I think is more has more and more place to grow, and because yeah, they're super interested and they really want to join. So I think
And male suicide is the highest it has ever been.
yeah,
You know, like if I do think that there are so many different, going back to your narrative point, you know, toxic masculinity, oh, you man up, do this. But then at the same time, when somebody shows some emotion, they're crushed, you know, you don't know how you're supposed to be. Um, but if male suicide is one of the biggest killers, like above cancer, then something's going wrong, you know. Like why are we not paying it more attention to that and nurturing that and understanding really why these people
yeah,
feel so desperate?
yeah. What's going on here? Yeah. What are we also doing wrong as a society for them to feel that desperate to do that?
Mm, yeah. And without talking and being open, and understanding each other, and
Yeah.
you know, it doesn't have to be a girly thing, does it? It can just be a
No,
human
exactly,
thing.
exactly. Exactly. I mean, I was listening to this podcast from this Diary of the CEO, where he invited three feminists to talk about
Feminist. Oh, that's a bit of a word, isn't it? Like, I don't really
exactly.
like the word feminist. It's
Me
like,
neither. It's
no, can we call
crazy.
it equality? I think that equality is the best way to describe what we're actually after, but feminism? Mm, yeah.
I no, I mean, with all the titles, I'm always very careful. I actually don't really like any titles. It's like
No, me neither. Yeah, agreed.
it's always changing anyway. So like, why do we have to put titles on things? You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a very interesting conversation because yeah, they were talking about these topics and how how this change of laws and change of societal norms and things have just evolved a lot in the last couple of decades. But at the same time, I feel that there is a lot of stuff that is still, you know, under the surface, really unspoken, and where you have to be kind of like that, I don't know, that masculine feminist in a way, you know, where it's like,
Mm.
let's fight like men to become, get our rights and just not, yeah, kind of doing the opposite of what we would be doing probably as recognizing our female power. I mean, you started it with saying intuition right at the beginning, and I thought that was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that she just mentioned just right at the beginning, and this was just so beautiful because I suspect very few men would do that, because it's just another way of operating, and that's fine and that's great, because also we need a lot of different operating ways, right? So
Oh yeah, of course we do. If we were all the same, it would. It would be a mess. I mean, it's a mess anyway. We've just spent a whole kind of like hour and a half talking about how messy it is. But I mean,
True.
what I mean, it would be a lot worse. Like we wouldn't
Yes.
be able to figure anything out if we all
Hmm.
thought the same way and behaved in the same way and solved problems in the same way. It just wouldn't work.
Yeah. No, exactly. Well, going a little bit more into the ending questions, what would you say is the new world for you? The new world in the making?
So it's one where Bitcoin is the reserve currency of the world,
Hmm.
where we find ways of it scaling to people. Providing the base layer remains sufficiently decentralized, I think we'll see lots of solutions built on top of Bitcoin, and you'll have to make your own trade offs, and it'll be from centralized to decentralized, and you'll decide what trade offs that you have to make. I think we'll have an abundance of energy. I think we'll have an energy rich future. I'm really hoping that AI frees us because at the moment we are very time poor. I mean, if we could take some of that time back and do some more creative things or spend more time with our families, be less stressed, cook from scratch, feel like you've got time to go for an hour walk, like all
Yeah.
these lovely
Do
things
that
that really make a
inquiry.
difference.
Yes.
Then that's the world that I think Bitcoin could bring to us,
Hmm.
really, because it would put us on a sound money, which is something that I don't think we've ever really seen, ever, really. I mean, there've always been ways of debasing our currencies, whether it was, you know, clipping coins or detaching it from the gold standard. Like, there's always been ways that where debasement has happened, and a truly verifiable, finite, scarce asset that is global and neutral, that can only change the world, right? And that's why I live, breathe, and sleep it all the time. Like I'm even thinking about it in my sleep. It just never stops. Yeah,
No, it never stops. Yeah, it's funny to see. Yeah, like the evolution is really funny to see how much you get into it, and then it
yeah.
never stops. Um, and what's maybe something that has surprised you recently?
Was that on the list of questions? Like I don't know, I haven't prepared for that one. I said that question
About it.
surprised me. That one, I know. What surprised me?
Fine. We don't need to go into that. Well, I
Things surprise me all the time. Oh, Epstein's list has disappeared. That shocks me. Like, what? Yeah, apparently that doesn't exist anymore. The FBI said so. Like, how? How the hell is Ghislaine Maxwell in prison and no one else is? Like, but that has surprised me.
great. Let's go with this one. Yeah, that is very surprising.
It's surprising. You can
There's
cut that out if you want to.
no,
Like, feel free.
I love how natural this is. Um, and is there anything else that you would share before the last question? Something that we've not covered? Anything that you would like to add?
No, I think you've done a very thorough job. I can't think of anything else that I would ask.
And maybe a question that you would leave the listeners with, something to think about.
Um, I would encourage people to think about how much of their world and their data and their privacy that they're giving up, and what that sacrifice will look like in the future, and to really pay attention of where they're swapping convenience for kind of selling their their information, and what's attached to, like face IDs, and what are you giving up? Like I just really want to encourage people to think about privacy, KYC, government overreach, surveillance states, the rise of authoritarian governments over the world, and just look at what's happening and think, just because we in Europe have had relative stability for a long time, especially in our lifetimes. Like, we don't know. We think it can't happen to us, but it can, and it will, and it's cyclical. And just pay attention.
Okay, so I think this that we can wrap up here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
It was
having me.
a great conversation. I really enjoyed this.